We get another true story from viewer Silver. I'm calling this one, Yeah, Let's Not Meet. Now, this happened back in the summer of 2010 in the Blue Ridge, Georgia area. And Silver's children were still school age, and this was late July. They're basically a last hurrah of the summer trip. They had a friend who was ex Delta Force and also had grown up in the Blue Ridge area who was basically giving them the guided tour of the good backcountry spots in the area. Now, first he had taken them to a place he called Eagle Point, and they met up with some ranger buddies of his who were out on maneuvers from Dahlonega. After that, they went to the Chattahoochee fishery, and eventually they landed up at this mountain stream where they were frolicking and playing, swimming in the mountain creek. And it had gotten pretty late into the day by this point. Now, Silver says all day long she kind of had this unshakable feeling that they were being watched anyway. And it didn't help matters much that there had been a lot of talk recently about some campers and hikers that had come up missing. So that mama bear mode was already kicked in on her. Well, they kept hearing tree knocks. Now, I'm sure a lot of you know where I'm headed with this, but there's not a lot of things out in the woods that can grab a hold of something to knock on a tree, other than humans or something else with opposable thumbs. Well, anyway, long about the third tree knock, even her Delta Force friend got wind that, that her radar had been tripped, that something was setting her off. And even at one point, she said her daughter had swam over to her and said that she had the feeling that they were being watched also. Well, so the Delta Force friend kind of looks over and she says, "Yeah, we need to be making our way back to the car now. It's starting to get dusk. We need to make our way back to the car." So she was trying not to ruin everybody's fun, but she definitely let it be known that it was time to exit stage left. So they do make it. They make their way to the car safely, but the area they're in is pretty remote. And even at dusk, it's not quite twilight yet, but with the heavy, dense canopy ahead, they're still having to turn their headlights on. And there's a lot of switchback curves to get down back to civilization, basically. And as they're making their way, you have to slow down considerably every time you get to one of the hairpin switchbacks. And as Silver and her daughter must have been looking in the same direction, because Silver said she felt, that something was still stalking them, even though they had left the immediate area where they were swimming, and they were probably a 15-minute drive from it by now. That her and her daughter just happened to be looking in the same direction, and that's when they caught sight of it. Or Silver caught sight of it, and her daughter must have too, because she yelled, "Oh my God." Well, Silver says this thing was a good 7.5 foot to 8 foot tall. It had dark brown fur, but it had tufts of reddish brown fur. Said the eyes looked human enough, that it could have passed for a human, but the bridge of the nose was very flat, like a silverback gorilla. So, of course, she's making a hasty retreat. Of course, her son and the Delta Force guy, they don't know what the panic is about. They haven't seen anything. Of course, it is dark. Like I said, she's already got her headlights turned on. And they come around another hairpin turn. And the son is saying that he doesn't think there's anything there, that they're just panicking for no reason. So Silver locks the car down and turns the headlights off and just sitting there waiting. And then she said her son starts to scream too. So she taps the brake, and in the brake light, they saw this thing coming right towards him. So in the time it takes them to get the car back into gear and to turn the headlights on, this thing has full on slammed the back of their trunk. Now, the Delta Force guy still hasn't seen this thing, but nobody can deny that something just slammed their trunk. Well, they do finally make it out of the dense canopy back out, into basically civilization, but they don't stop until they get all the way home. Now, when they do get home, that's when they saw that they get out to look at the trunk, and there are these handprints, too dense. They look like human handprints, only they're 3 times the size of a full-grown man's hands. Now, not only that, but later on that night, they hear rustling around outside, and when Silver goes out the next morning, there is this pile of river stones on her front steps, arranged in a perfect pyramid. And even in the months that followed, her and her daughter both had heard prowling outside of their bedroom window. So they eventually moved because of all this activity. Now, she says to this day that her son still won't even talk about the incident, and her daughter will no longer talk about what they saw that day. So what do you guys think? I know what I think, and it wouldn't be the first time I've heard a story out of the North Georgia mountains similar to this. I've heard a lot of them. There seems to be a lot of that type of activity in the North Georgia mountains, especially in the Chattahoochee National Forest. If you know, you know. But anyway, that's been Jay's Haunted Appalachia for tonight. Keep sending me your stories, guys. And thank you, Silver, for your story. Keep Appalachia haunted, y'all.